welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. This is the podcast where we look back at games that we've played on the Gauntlet, in this case covering August. My name is Lowell, and I'm joined by my co-host Jammi.
Hi, everybody. Hello, hello.
And this episode, we have one of my favorite people and favorite players. We have Darold Ross, who is a longtime Gauntlet player. We'll link in the show notes, but he has a story that's on Amazon. On that, we're going to link everything that you've done and that you're working on, because I think it's just great. Daryl, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here. And also, I can't believe you mentioned that short story. I'm just like, oh gosh.
It's great.
Great. Congratulations. Didn't you hit number one on some of the lists, right?
Yes, okay. Not humble brag time. I hit number one on teen and YA short reads, and number one on sci-fi action adventure reads, and number two in LGBT short reads. I'm very, very, very shocked by all of those things. Completely unexpected. I did not know what I was getting into.
Awesome.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
In our first segment, we are going to look at August, talk about the games. We're going to pick one to talk about. So, Jammi, let's start with you. Tell us about your August.
Yeah, in August, what I got to play off the Gauntlet first, I got to play Balikbayan, Returning Home, Keepers of the Cards, Our Magical School with Darold, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. That was really good. It was very thirsty. There were swords. There were indeed lesbians. Who knew that this game was so straightforward? But it has a lot of depth. It's really good. And on the Gauntlet, I got to play Alien. I believe it is my third time playing Alien with Jason as a GM. It was a lot of fun. I almost died several times, which is part of the fun.
You almost died, whereas in the time I played Alien with you, you killed my character or let them die.
You're not going to let me let that down.
Not going to let you forget that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was thinking it the whole time because we have our secret agendas, and I had a nice one. Mine was like, if you have to sacrifice yourself. I was like thinking, this is what Lowell thought I was doing when we were playing together. So good, though.
It was not that.
It was so good. But yeah, and I still watch that recording every once in a while because the look of shock on your face.
It's a good session. Yeah.
It's really good. Anyway, I also got to play Hearts of Lumen, the Supernatural playset, also with Daryl, so that's a treat. And I got to play Better the Devil Who Serves You without Daryl, so I was very sad about that. I'm talking about Better the Devil Who Serves You today. So, Better the Devil Who Serves You is a game I am working on. I put it together very quickly last year because it was for a game jam. The original idea was if you take one person who's used to being in one class or vocation and put them into something else, right? So what if they used to be a warlock and now they bake bread? That was kind of the idea of the jam. Like, the idea was, like, hopefully they go into something non-combative or something cozy and cute, though it wasn't, like, a main rule. So, of course, my mind went to, what if they are demon lords from D&D, but now they are butlers at a butler cafe? Because that's how that's how my brain works.
Checks out.
Yeah, right? Makes total sense. So when I used to run D&D, I loved the Demon Lords. I loved using Demon Princes, Demon Lords, the whole shebang, because they made really great long-term villains that were hard to, like, really get rid of. And they were just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them. So in this game, the Demon Lords were accidentally summoned by a young witch master. This was also inspired by a webcomic. I am so sad I cannot track it down anymore. I think it was a Chinese webcomic or Korean, I'm not sure, but basically the idea was this cute young child accidentally called a succubus, and the succubus was like, well, I guess I'll just take care of you and become your older brother now. So I loved it so much. I was like, let's have a whole game about that. So in this game, the Demon Lords are summoned, they're charmed by the young witch child, and now they take care of them. And the young witch master has always wanted to have a cafe, and so now our demon lords are devil butlers, right? So what could possibly go wrong is the premise of the game. What worked for me before every playtest, I don't know if the game's going to go well. I hope it'll go well. I pray it will go well, but it's always like, you're not sure until it gets to the table. So I was really surprised that this one worked much better than I thought. I've tweaked it a lot since the release from Itch.io. And what I really liked is the slice of life comfort through structured play. This is going to sound funny, but I was inspired by Ghost Lines by John Harper, which is not a cozy game.
No.
Yeah, you go in trains and you take care of ghosts, and it's very harrowing. But when I ran the game, it felt very comforting. What does that sound like for me? But it felt comforting for me because we were always following the structure. You start up the game, you decide what roles you're going to take on the train, and then when you meet the ghost, you follow this specific procedure beforehand that helps set things up as a GM. And then afterwards, you go into downtime, like mini downtime actions, because it's kind of forged in the dark, mostly PBTA, but very stripped down. And it felt so comforting. It felt very easy to run. I really enjoyed it. It was very easy to drop in and play. And so I thought, what if I take that and put that here? And I really did enjoy the repeated structure of every episode or session we had. It was very reminiscent of the very chill slice of life anime. So you start with morning tasks. So you decide, are you going to spy on the competition? Are you going to check in on the young witch master? Are you going to go on social media, see what the customers are saying about the cafe? It's a lot of fun. It's very cute. And then it's a good way to like warm up. And then you roll for the service day, see how that's going, see how it's going to start when you get to the cafe. And then you have the evening tasks. So when you get home, we had one where you post charming pictures of yourself. And so David, who was playing the succubus-inspired demon character, kept posting thirst traps on Instagram. I thought that was hilarious. It was so cozy and funny. But I really like the evening tasks because it sort of built in a way to reflect on what happened during the day. So you could choose an option to hang out with the other devil butlers. And then from there, they would talk a little bit about what happened during the service day. And it made me realize that I wish we had more built-in stuff like that in games, where you got to reflect as both a character and a player what happened during the session. I know we do Stars and Wishes here a lot, which I really love, but it was nice to have an in-game way to reflect on things. It was really, really cute. And another thing I liked is the playbooks really got into these strong archetypes that we see in anime. It was super fun seeing it in play. So we had, for example, the intellectual perfectionist, the intense charmer, hashtag the thirst trap, the lazy, unambitious one, and the shonen protagonist. It's one playbook that's all like, it's about living life to the fullest, or you have a move like, now you've made me mad, and you go into a duel. It's just, they're obviously supposed to be in a different anime, but they're in the slice of life one. So it's really cute. And what I like is the game has very simple rules. It has a simple premise. You only really show up to serve people at the cafe, and then you go home with your young witch master. It's just very simple, day by day. And the basic service moves are what a devil butler would say to a customer. So, for example, how are you today? Coming right up, if I may be so bold. So it's really simple and routine. You can fit a lot in a session. So usually we'd have 1 hour for starting up the game, the morning tasks, and then starting the service day. Then we'd have 1.5 hours for the actual day at the cafe where shenanigans would occur. And then 30 minutes for the evening tasks. It would all fit in. So it meant we had 3 hours. It felt really satisfying. I could still fit in 2 breaks, about 10 or 5 minutes. So it felt like, oh, this is nice to have this really complete package of a game. I think that really lent to the coziness.
Daryl, do you want to jump in with any comments on this?
First of all, just how dare you make this game that is so obviously meant for me and then schedule it on a night where I was already running a game. I
was so sad. I was like, oh no, Daryl can't. I made this game for Daryl. Literally while I was tweaking it, I was thinking about which playbook you would pick.
Yeah, I adore all of the things that you discussed. And if there was a thing that I would really love to see in action, I need to go watch the videos, and I absolutely will. But I would love to see how those interactions go over time, because the trajectory of like slice of life anime is always like incremental changes and like small growths, and I
Right.
just think that there's so much potential there for, oh, like how does the little witch master change the demons for the better, and like it just makes my heart sing and melt and do all sorts of gooey things, and I'm very excited. I can't wait to finally get into a series with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out, honestly. Like, there's some playtests where I go, well, I learned a lot and we had fun, but wow, I really did a bad job with that one.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, I felt like, despite me, it worked really well. But there are a few things I'm not so sure about. So the first thing is
Okay.
that it's super niche within niche. So you don't have a lot of, I mean, if it wasn't obvious that this was niche within niche, but, we don't have a lot of anime games to begin with. We have so many fantasy games, but we don't have a lot of anime ones. And then plus on top of that, the Butler Cafe is pretty unique. I kept trying to explain it to the players before the recording, and they kept giving me strange faces. Like, like
Yeah.
when I tried to explain, when I went to one, I didn't realize I had been waiting my whole life to be called mistress at a cafe with a maid whose backstory was that she was raised by cows. That's why her maid outfit was a cow print. It was a great experience. Like, if anyone can get to a butler or maid cafe, it's like being transported into an anime. That's what it feels like. Like, it's very cute, very wholesome, but it's super niche. It's very niche. I don't know if I can recommend this game for everyone, but if you like cozy slice of life stuff, this could be fun. I have the old prototype on my itch page. I'm very embarrassed by it, but I'm keeping it up there, keeping myself honest. It's currently free, but my patrons will probably get the current version in this coming month or the next one, so that's really exciting. And yeah, so my main takeaways are, I need to play more cozy games. I need to play more slice of life games. I need to balance out my deep hunger for catharsis and intensity. I say, even though I'm running Apocalypse Keys a lot lately, which is the opposite of cozy.
Yeah.
And my last takeaway is we need more anime games.
Mm-hmm.
I know this was a conversation recently online, but, when I look at the anime games we have, it's either super loud, big, crazy anime, or quotation mark Ghibli games. Like, what does Ghibli games mean? But that's what people always use as a term. So anime is not a monolith. It's more than just those two binaries. I mean, it's an entire medium for a whole culture. It has a lot of diversity of story. I'd love to imagine the difference between a Perfect Blue game and a Psycho-Pass game, right? Those two are like worlds apart. Or if you can have the difference between Violet Evergarden and Ancient Magus Bride, like just completely different games. I'd love to see more RPGs that like fill up those little things on the spectrum. But yeah, so
That's a really good point.
yeah.
Anything else you want to ask or comment, Daryl, before we move on?
No, I think that was a really great summary. I also very much think that we need many more anime games, and I'm doing my part as well to that. So
Yes.
Good. There's a weird glut of anime games in like the end of the 90s where because the US was getting all these VHS tapes, and so these people bought all the properties and were doing them, but then that just bottom kind of fell out of that, and nobody has done anything besides sort of really generic, here's an anime toolkit, but we really haven't seen ones that address that, and we should.
And now is a really great time for it too, because I think that a lot of the games that came out of that, like Big Eyes Small Mouth and other things, they were really trying to like be, like you said, like a toolkit to do like all things for everyone. But I feel like nowadays we have so much more of an understanding about how do we frame a mechanic to tell a specific kind of story. And I think that we would be able to come up with like, what is a game that just gets to the heart of what Perfect Blue is? What is a game that just gets to the heart of what Violet Evergarden is? And the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Daryl, tell us about your August.
Well, I'll start with Off Gauntlet, because actually August was kind of intense for me. Like, I played a lot more than I usually do.
Oh,
Off Gauntlet, I played a bunch of Cheat Your Own Adventure, a bunch of Fall of Magic for the Queen. I play those with primarily like a lot of the people I know IRL who are not that invested in like long form story games, or who can't really commit to a lot of like, weekly sessions and things like that. So a lot of these like one-off games, one of these short kind of burst games are really great for those people who like are interested in it, want to give it a try, but can't really dedicate the time or the effort into something that we do like on the Gauntlet. So those were really great. I also played off Gauntlet Keepers of the Cards, Our Magical School, run by Jammi. That was great. And then I also played in a Good Society game that was themed off of the works of Anton Chekhov.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun. On Gauntlet, I only played 2 games on Gauntlet. One was the Hearts of Wulin Supernatural playtest with Jammi as well. And then I ran a series of Monster Hearts using a custom theme that I have been toying with for about a year that explores like classism and richness in high school. So those were a lot of fun.
Is that something you plan on maybe putting out for people at some point?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got a lot of material written for it, and it's just one of those things where now we're at a point where how do I condense it down and make it accessible in like 3,000 words? Because y'all will know I'm not brief.
So what is it you want to talk about today?
So I decided that I would really like to talk about the Good Society Chekhov edition that I played in.
Ooh, interesting.
Henceforth, I will refer to it as Chekhov Society, just as a nice little abbreviation. But let me talk about what that is. So Chekhov Society is a hack of Good Society by Story Brewers Role-Playing, and it is a collaborative role-playing game that seeks to capture the heart and the countenance of Jane Austen's work. A game is about social ambition, family obligation, and breathtaking, heart-stopping longing. So all of the things that I love and adore. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what Good Society is, other than to mention some of the hallmarks that it is a GM-less game, it uses a token economy, and it has a structured stages of play. We've had plenty of people on the podcast before who have talked about Good Society. We've had Haley and V on previously. Leandro did a really great episode in June of 2019 that dives deep into how Good Society plays. So if you are not familiar with Good Society, I suggest you go check out that episode and then come back to this, because I am talking about The Hack by Catherine Rahman of Aviatrix Games. Cat Ramen did a series of games starting in 2019 of last year that basically wanted to take Good Society and instead of focusing it on the works of Jane Austen, wanted to do Leo Tolstoy and transport the game into the Russian society. And I was lucky enough to get to play in some of those early games and have been playing in them on and off through the last couple of years. And this time we decided that we wanted to do a hack of Anton Chekhov, which is a very different ballgame from Tolstoy and even a different game from Austen herself. So for those who are interested, Kat did a really great piece in Codex Melancholy, also from July of 2019, where it's called Every Heart Has Its Skeletons, Using Good Society in the World of War and Peace. It's a really great starter reference, and it goes into depth about the Tolstoy work that we did. But as I said, we played in Chekhov instead. I'd like to talk a little bit about, first of all, what these games kind of meant to me on a basic level, and then talk about some of the cool things that Kat did to change it up. So the first thing is, like, Good Society, I just adore because, as we established, it's an intensely interpersonal drama style game. It really leans into the conflict between people that grows up just by how they live and interact with each other. So it doesn't generally lead itself to like having like big kind of conflicts that come from outside of the core main characters. It creates this really real and raw and kind of emotional stories that can really spring up around the ways that these people just butt up against each other, and I really love that. So many of my favorite memories have actually come out of Good Society games, just because of like they allow you to go to places that you may not necessarily go in other games. They allow an emotional openness and fragility that I think is missing from some other games that have a more mechanical focus or a more focused genre. One of the other things that I really love about the work that Kat did for this game was that drifting the game into a different setting and using different literary references means that you're kind of playing in this whole new context, especially in a context that people might not have really been able to experience before. So I personally have always had like this like long-standing fascination with Russian history and Russian society. I've had a lot of awkward feelings about that considering political stuff lately, even before all of this big gestures into the vague ether. But yeah, like this really gave me an opportunity to kind of play in a space that I was really fascinated with for a long time, but that I never really got around to playing. So the framing of that, moving it from Austen to Russia, was like just really fun. And The next thing that I want to talk about is actually some of the mechanical things that Kat did that I thought were really great. The first thing that we did was there's this long-standing thing about Good Society about the token economy and like how the token economy works. Some people really love it, and then some people who are a bit more experienced with story games feel it's almost a little superfluous because they're like, I've already made it bad enough. I don't know why I need to try to pay you to make it worse for me. So what Kat did actually, which I thought was really great, was she kind of like used a system that was inspired by Primetime Adventures that she called Stage Presence, which is based off of, I believe it's called Screen Presence in the original RPG. And so what we did was we played 5 sessions. We had 5 players, and each session, each person got a variable number of resolve tokens based on their screen presence in that particular episode.
Ooh, smart.
So the player who was going to be on center stage in this particular episode would get 3 resolve tokens, and then another player would get 2 resolve tokens because they would be the kind of like supporting cast member in that particular episode. And then the other 3 players would get 1 resolve token apiece. I really thought that this was great because not only what it did was it allows us to, from the very beginning, plot out what we think the arc of the story is going to be.
Yeah.
But it gave each character the idea of this is where I'm going to need to hit my highs, this is where I want to make my impacts, and then this is where I'm going to work in service of the story of the other characters. It was a really great system, and I loved it specifically because we got to, like, from the get-go, like, we had leaned into our archetypes, we had done our character creation, we had plotted out our relationships and everything, and then we got to be like, okay, let's find out when we each get to be our own disaster piece. The next thing that she did that I thought was really great was in Good Society, there's a mechanic called Rumors and Scandal that you play during the various stages where you basically, it's exactly what's on the tin. You make up rumors and scandals about each other that you then circulate into Good Society, and then your characters have to deal with it. Whether those rumors and scandals are true or not, like, that's for you to decide, and that is how society functions. But what we did instead was we replaced that with a mechanic that Kat called Questions and Secrets. And so what that meant is that instead of randomly throwing different stuff like, a surprise pregnancy, or, oh no, we saw them sneaking out in the dark of night from someone's room. Instead of doing those kinds of things, we established a question and a secret for each character on each of the reputation phases. So the question was actually something that was plot relevant, like, will Varia be cast as the lead for An Orchard in Winter? And so that became one of the core conceits of our next novel chapter. And so that really helped us kind of like decide where we wanted the narrative to go in a much more focused way. And then the scandals part was replaced by secrets, which were where we, as our characters, determined a secret that we were going to reveal in play, but that it was, incumbent upon our characters to keep secret. So, for instance, my painter, Timothy, was the hot young thing around town. Everyone was loving these neo-cubist paintings that I was doing. But what no one knew was that I was burning through money way more than I could earn it. A part of that meant that I had to con Leandro's character into giving me an advance on my next contract so that I wouldn't go broke. It was a really great mechanic because basically what it meant was that we could really push the narrative in interesting directions, and we would always complicate the plot for ourselves, but we weren't necessarily doing it in a way that can feel random with Good Society's standard rumors and scandals. And so that's what worked for me for this really great hack and experience.
There's a point that you made that I think is really interesting, is the idea that with the rumors and scandals is it can feel random because people can kind of come up with anything.
Right.
And I've seen that in other games where they give you a very open prompt to do those kinds of inputs, and you can end up getting with stuff that you're like, okay, we're never going to get to that, or that feels more like a weight than it does something that's going to bring new stuff to the table. That's a really interesting point. Just to stick to our format, I have to ask, are there some things you were less sure about?
First of all, I will start off with the obvious. Good Society is a long-form game. It is meant to be played over many sessions. You're generally recommended to play +1 of number of sessions for how many players you have. So in our case, we had 5 players. You're supposed to play 6 cycles of gameplay. I said sessions previously, but I meant cycles. And the cycle is a very constructed, 8 to 10 piece play set that you go through. And that doesn't work when you are incredibly theater people, like all of my lovely Chekhov Society compatriots are. We averaged 1 novel chapter per session. You're supposed to get through 2.
Oh my gosh.
And So yeah, Good Society as a game needs to be a long form game, and
Mm.
when you can't play it for like multiple sessions and you can't do the mechanical parts of like jumping forward in time and having those clear delineations of scene, I think something comes out of it just a little bit
Hmm.
because a part of that story and a part of the structure of Austen and Tolstoy is seeing the progression over time. So if you can't hit all of those sessions, or if you're not good about like making sure that you're staying brief within them, it can feel a little bit like you lose something.
Hmm.
Ooh.
I don't feel like necessarily that our stories were diminished in any way because we didn't hit it, but I feel like there was probably more we could have done if we had carried it longer. So, and we played 5 sessions of that game,
Mm.
and we still feel like there was more to. In a very Chekhovian style, we actually ended in a bit of a cliffhanger,
Hmm.
a bit of a like
Ooh.
we were there and we had this sudden realization and a sudden parting of ways, but there was the question of like what will they do now because they still move in the same circles, which is very Chekhovian.
Cool. Wow.
And then to be a little bit more focused on specifically the Chekhovian society that we played, I'm not super familiar with Chekhov. We were recommended to read the short story The Lady and the Dog, which I did. I also watched a theatrical adaptation of The Seagull. So I basically went into Chekhov with 2 pieces of media and some spark notes under my belt. And Good Society, in a way, also has this thing where if you don't know the literature very well, it can be harder for you to incorporate the tropes on your own, just because
Mm.
while there's a lot baked into it, like the epistolary chapter and things like that, there are other things that you really kind of only get if you are a little, at least a bit familiar with the tropes of the literature. And
Hmm.
so I, for the most part, feel like I did a pretty good job of being Chekhovian, but I feel like I could have maybe made some different choices in the narrative. Again, not to the detriment of the story or anything, but
Mm.
I think I would have been a bit more comfortable heading into it if I had made the time to do the homework.
Hmm.
And I know that's the thing that a lot of people don't necessarily want or have the ability to do before heading into a game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And your overall takeaway?
My overall takeaways are that I just really love when people get a game and push it outside of its comfort zone and into new settings because it really just shows what the underlying mechanical strengths of the system are.
Hmm.
I like kind of knocked it a little bit, but I still think that Good Society is actually one of the best RPGs I have ever played. It's so well constructed. It gets its beats. It has so many of these like little mechanical things that really make it sing. The epistolary is one of my favorite things ever because there's nothing like dropping a truth bomb in a letter and then sending it on its way. It's fantastic. And then the final thing is just that I think that if you're doing Good Society, if you're doing Chekhov Society, if you're doing Tolstoy Society, whatever your hack, I think it inspires people to go read the source literature. I have read more Chekhov since then, and I'm very much enjoying it. I wish I'd done that before, but here we are. And that's it.
So my August was pretty good. Off Gauntlet, I did 13th Age, I did Hearts of Wulin, I did our Star Trek Adventures Express, and then for Games on Demand Online, I ran a session of Hearts of Wulin and a session of Pasión de las Pasiones. And then on Gauntlet, I played Leverage, and I ran Free from the Yoke with our L5R Rokugan hack. And I ran Veiled Fantasy, which is the Veil, but done with fantasy, which I've talked about before on the podcast. And then the last thing I did is I played a one-shot of, I'm going to say Vaesen. This may be entirely wrong. But I want to talk about that for kind of a really particular reason. It's a one-shot, so I don't have all that much to say, but I want to kind of point at it and a very particular reaction I had to it. So Vaesen is Nordic horror role-playing. And this was a one-shot run by Anders Gabrielson. It's the most recent Freely game using the Mutant engine, which powers Forbidden Lands and Tales from the Loop. And it's one of the first that they've done that I didn't back because I wasn't sure about it. Like, would I get this to the table? I wasn't sure. I'll quote, "It is based on the work of Swedish illustrator and author Joan Egerkrans. Vaesen presents a dark Gothic study steeped in Nordic folklore and the old myths of Scandinavia." So, very particular cultural context, and it takes place in Sweden in the late 19th century. So, keep that in mind. Picture that. I like the mutant system generally. I think this is a pretty decent implementation of that. All the mutant games, it's a D6 pool system, and what really kind of differentiates is because it's very hard to get the target number.
So
like you're
hard.
rolling a bunch of
So
D6
hard.
and you just need a 6. You're not going to get it. The mechanic that really differentiates the game is, how do I reroll? And in Mutant Year Zero, you reroll and there's a chance to take damage. In other games, you can mark a condition to get a reroll. And in this one, it works pretty well. It's a very simple mark a condition, you get a reroll, you take a penalty going forward. They split it into physical and mental conditions. So even if you mark a condition for physical, it doesn't affect all of your skills, which is sometimes the problem with other mutant games.
Yeah.
I will also mention that I like how equipment is handled in these mutant games. I love the little equipment table that's in this game because it's very period. It's kind of dumb, but I love kind of going through there and having to pick out, am I going to take a lamp or do I want to buy a loaf of bread? It's so stupid, but I kind of like it. The game itself has interesting archetypes for the different characters, interesting talents for them. They're still pretty loose. There's no real character class. It kind of just shapes it a little bit. But here's the thing. So it's a horror role-playing game. It's got a very particular context. What really worked for me is having Anders run it. He comes from that culture. He comes from that background. And he also put in the additional research beyond just knowing the culture of doing some historical details and pictures and period stuff that supplemented what he was presenting us. And I can't overstate how much deeper and more rich that made this game. I learned a lot about religious questions between Catholicism and Protestantism in 19th century Sweden, and about the problematic treatment of some of the cultures, including the Sami people, which is what would be called, I think, Laplanders, and other cultures that have different names. There's a whole set of things you didn't realize, and how structures were set up to try to push them out and things. Really interesting stuff. Things about the lifestyle of the period. All of this stuff wasn't part of the scenario. It had nothing to do with the scenario.
Ooh.
But it was everything that Anders brought to the table that colored the presentation, that made it I really, really enjoyed that. It was a really interesting way to get a feel for that period. Things I was less sure about. Let me talk about a couple of mechanical points, and then I want to talk about the big question. The dice pool system works in this. It's good. It's fine. I'm a little disappointed that they didn't use Alien's mechanic. The Alien implementation has a really smart way to handle fear and stress. It's really good. I think that this game could have benefited from that because it really works with the horror. You've got fear tests when you face something that's scary in this game. I'm always leery about that. I'd like to have that we have a reaction mechanic, but if I've done all the work of preparation and getting the things and figuring out the steps and the mystery and so on, and we get to the big fight and I botch my fear test and then freak out and can't do anything, that's a little undercutting the labor that I've done before. It's what makes the Alien system better because there are some risk-reward things in terms of getting those dice into your pool that make it like it's my choice to see how much risk I'm going to have when we come to that. So those are a couple things. I enjoyed this session. I enjoyed this game, and I would definitely play it again with Anders. And I might even buy a copy. I'm actually tempted because I would like to read it. But it is absolutely something I wouldn't want to run. Having seen it conveyed with the nuance that Anders did, I couldn't. Even though I'm a Westerner, it's such a very particular kind of national flavor and identity. If people ever are like, well, L5R is fine. There's a lot of Asian cultures in there, but it's fine because they kind of bring them all together. No.
Right.
This is an illustration of why melting pot cultures together in an RPG is a problem. Mm-hmm. Because you lose so much of this really important context. I could run it, but I would have to lean into the supernatural and mystic elements, and I'd really have to work from the source material. But to get just the absolute interesting flavor and depth, I couldn't do it. That's a hard thing to swallow because, I'm a super hot rock star GM. I can run anything. Nope. Nope. And it was a really powerful realization for me. It relates to last year, the year before, I talked about Things from the Flood, mm-hmm. which is another game and from Free League, and it's set in
the 90s, right?
1990s, but 1990s Europe.
Oh.
That is so freaking different. 90s in Europe is so freaking different from 90s in America. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And that was wild. And the cultural context of that, I ran the same game but set in America. But looking back, I had to ditch so much of the really interesting cultural richness that was in the original game. And the game's built to do that, so you can run it other places. But, it's not sort of the original authorial intent. And I do think you lose something.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, long story short, if Gothic Nordic horror sounds like your jam, this is definitely a game for it. And I think it is a really interesting illustration of how important cultural context is for RPG materials.
What for you would make you feel more confident? Like, what could be built in either in the book or mechanics-wise that would make you feel like you understood the nuance better?
I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll actually want to compare this to preparation for Corandon.
Mm-hmm.
So with Vaesen, I can see all the nuance. I understand the context of the Protestant versus Catholic. I can understand sort of the big picture of this and things like that. And I can pick out where those things are happening and why they're important and why they have weight. But there's a blissful ignorance with Corandon.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great game. It's based in Filipino and Malaysian and all this kind of wonderful folklore and things. And the author brings all that stuff to there. I have no idea what's important and what has more cultural weight or context.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just writing down terms and trying to place them and then focusing on the fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a weird bit where, not knowing that full context, I can fake it more. I like because I'm not feeling as guilty. And that sounds really weird because I do want to run Corandon and I'm very excited about it. And there's lots of stuff, but I know I'm not going to do a great job. Even though I've been reading Thousand Islands and some other material and things like that to get it, but I'm going for where I see the spectacle and big picture things.
Yeah. Which is what Corandon's about, so I think that's totally fine. No, that's a good point. I like how you brought up those two to compare to each other.
It was a real treat and a real joy to play this with someone from Scandinavian country. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
Oh yeah, that sounds really awesome.
So let's move on to our second segment. Hello listeners, I want to tell you our next Gauntlet Community Open Gaming event will be happening the weekend of October 15th through the 18th. This is a free tabletop RPG online con with a variety of games. This October event will feature panels and workshops, as well as sessions of everything from Swords of the Serpentine to Pasión de las Pasiones to Trophy Dark. We're lucky to have gaming veteran Jim Crocker overseeing things this October. Event signups will open Thursday, October 1st at 10 a.m. Eastern. Gauntlet Community Open Gaming is free and open to anyone. You can check out the current roster of events and register for the con on our calendar site at gauntlet-con.firebaseapp.com. All sessions will be run using tabletop safety tools and follow our Gauntlet Community Code of Conduct. We want to offer a safe and inclusive environment for play. You can find out more at our website, gauntlet-rpg.com, in our online gaming section. If you're interested in running sessions or have an idea for a panel or a workshop, you can message the Gauntlet on Twitter at GauntletRPG or Jim Cocker directly at JimLikesGames. Gauntlet Community Open Gaming is a great way to jump into online role-playing and find a new game to try out. We hope you'll join us the weekend of October 15th through 18th. Listeners, our second segment, we're going to talk to our guest, Darold, about a topic of their choice, something they're working on or excited about. So, Darold, what do you want to talk about today?
I very briefly want to talk about a new project that I'm working on. It is a powered by the Apocalypse game called Blood Ties. It is a game with roots in Hearts of Wulin and Brindlewood Bay.
Yes,
I know, right? And its purpose is to tell stories about witches living, loving, and fighting evil in their quaint New England hometown. You, as the players, play as the heirs to powerful magical dynasties, each with their own special brand of witchcraft, and it is inspired by stories like Practical Magic, Witches of East End, Charmed, and The Secret Circle. And you use the game to create your own worlds of drama, suspense, romance, and enchantment. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about like my motivations for designing the game, the evolution of the game design, and then the feelings of developing it. The reason that I wanted to design this game is I personally have always had a deep and abiding love for stories about witches, but there are not really that many games out there that focus on this particular kind of niche. They are usually stories much more centered on like the supernatural genre as a whole, or if they deal with magic, they usually take a much more gritty kind of tone to it. And then the other thing is they're usually focused much more on things like the sorcerer, the enchanter, the wizard. They don't deal with like the kind of narrow scope of what witch stories are. And those are generally the reason that it's important to me is because as someone who has always loved stories about witches, there are not very many stories about boy witches.
Yeah.
If you are a boy, then you are a wizard, and you are meant to be like Harry Potter or someone else who goes off and like slays dragons or courts gods or has these huge adventures. You don't get like the quiet kind of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. You don't get the practical magic if you're a boy who uses magic. So this game started off as my own attempt to kind of queer and deconstruct that gender binary. It was just really important to me that boys can be witches too, and also that men can and should actually engage with the more emotional side of these things, including romance. I am a deep fan of romance literature and the romance genre as a whole, and I think that more people would be more invested in it if we could find some way to decouple the stigma of romance as a women's genre. So that's one of the things this game is about. It's basically just my attempt to kind of tell stories about the things that I loved growing up about people like me. So the thing is, I've been working on this game off and on for like 2 years, like 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's basically as long as I have been playing tabletop RPGs.
So it's a really important game.
Yeah.
It's a really significant game, yeah.
Yeah. And it's gone through like a number of iterations, reincarnations, as it were. It started off as like a straight PBTA game. And when I say that, I mean it took a lot of inspiration from Monster of the Week and Monster Hearts and some of the earlier PBTA games that I was playing at the time. That meant that it was fairly clunky. It had a long list of spells that you could cast and specific stats you had to roll with them. It had way too many moving parts, and honestly, all of those parts actually made the magic feel clunky and limited. And so I put it away for a while. I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. And then about a year ago, Dream Askew and Dream Apart came out. And I was like, hey, maybe this is the time. Maybe I can change the game into something that works more with that shared authorship system and allows you to be more collaborative. And it went through another couple of revisions, but I felt like I hit the opposite end of the spectrum where suddenly it was just too freewheeling. And I didn't think that it could like really tell the kind of stories that I wanted it to. And then over the summer, I started playing Hearts of Wulin with Jammi. And it started off as like a joke. We were shooting the breeze after a session, and we were like, what would be the ideal system to play Harry Potter in? And I just was like, well, obviously you just use a Brindlewood Bay mystery mechanic. And then like just lightning like went off in my head because it was the thing that I was looking for. And so the newest version of Blood Ties is actually a Hearts of Wulin inspired game that uses the basic systems of aspects and playbooks and entanglements, but puts them in the framework of these kinds of magical romance stories. And then it uses I really loved the level system in Hearts of Wulin, but it didn't quite feel like it was clicking with the kind of episodic Monster of the Week kind of thing that a lot of these TV shows are based around.
Right.
And then like when I thought about like, well, using the Brindlewood Bay mechanic just makes it just click into place. So the things that I really love about it is in my version, the elements have become what I'm calling aspects. And so they are head, heart, hand, blood, and bone. which is very on brand. And they roughly align to the same elements in Hearts of Wulin. But the thing that really clicked into place was the playbooks. The way that in Hearts of Wulin, you have a playbook that has a main base of rules, and then you get to choose one that really flavors who the character is. And so I had struggled for such a long time. I made like probably 20 playbooks of like various different kinds of magic that you could do in the PBTA version. But Hearts of Wulin just like...
Oh, you just get to slot it in.
Yeah, and that's...
Awesome.
It just started to sing. And so, and then, the entanglements and the bonds, that's what that genre of fiction is all about. It's like, how are you entangled? I think it was in our Supernatural game when my character, Ten Tempests, was, I am in love with Horizon, but in a past life, I was responsible for the death of his current lover, Stone of the Heavens. And I was like, that is witchy, dynastic BS.
100%.
Chef's kiss. Rather than just going on about what a pastiche of all of these great mechanics it is, the thing that I also wanted to talk about that's important to me for this game is that the relationship that people have with magic and the kind of like fraughtness that can bring. So the dichotomy of the two stats, blood and bone, works differently than the Hearts of Wulin with the strong and weak elements. And in this way, blood is the way that we relate to magic in like the quote-unquote natural way. It's when we work in synergy with the world to realize our vision in a way that best benefits everyone. Whereas if you cast a spell using bone, you're imposing your will upon the world. You're demanding that the magic gives you what you want. And the way that I'm currently working on that is that any spell that you cast with bone, you get like the 12 plus success at a steep cost. And I haven't quite nailed that down. I'm working with a corruption track right now to show that slide into quote unquote dark magic or, slide into like selfish magic. But I think that that's the thing that I am still, that really like clinches it, is because you can do all those other things and other games have done them really well, but I really want to just interrogate that particular relationship with magic.
I like that a lot. That sounds really good.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm so excited for this game.
Yes. I'm glad you're getting a chance to work on a game that you consider kind of your grail game,
Yeah.
Years and years ago when I first met Rich, we had a conversation about this, and Rich was like, I'd really like to do a baseball RPG, because that's like super important to him and his identity and so on. And it was years and years. He tried like various versions, and it was only once he kind of took the black hack and worked on it. And he's still tweaking and revising it. And it's been fun to watch. It's a joy when you can kind of find a good hook that you think, okay, now I think I'm on the right track.
Yeah. When it finally starts to sing, that's what it felt like, is like everything just was like, I see it now. And I think it still has a long way to go. But that actually leads into like the last thing that I kind of want to talk about, was that a game like this really could only have been formed on the Gauntlet. So please forgive me if I get a little maudlin here. But I was only really able to do this. I only feel empowered to do this because I've been on the Gauntlet for a couple of years, and I was just watching people create their own games through the Slack and through the forums as they came, and then participating in playtests and being inspired to, not just inspired, but invited to solve problems with people who are also making games, and realizing that the understanding of games and the opinion of games that I had was valid, and not just like, I'm just pouring everything that everyone else has done before into like a new little tray. That felt really great because I've never really felt like that was my lane.
Really? Because like in every playtest I set up, I'm like, I need to get Daryl in it. I need to. There are quite a few people, but who I'm all grateful for. But Daryl, your insight is always amazing. Your understanding of games and how mechanics support certain stories, but how they can't get in the way. I think that's always so invaluable. Like, my games would not be where they are without the Gauntlet and without you.
Y'all can't see this at home, but I'm crying now. But yeah, it's just, I think that the thing that feels really great about working on this game is that I'm kind of like really finally giving myself permission to create something versus like this feeling that I'm not qualified. And the Gauntlet gave me that, including you guys who are here, or y'all who are here on this in this chat with me, who've done so much, and I stand on the shoulders of giants.
I love that people are willing to just try something out and put it on the table. I think that's really important. And And it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will be doing playtests for this game starting in November. I am terrified.
Excellent.
It's not done yet, but from both of your advice, I have decided to give myself a ticking time bomb deadline.
Yeah, where you have no choice because people are going to show up ready to play, so you have to have.
Absolutely. Great. I'm so glad you're going to put it on the calendar. I put stuff on the calendar and I never really say they're play tests. I just want to play them. And afterwards we'll figure out how well they worked. And I love that. Listeners, we're going to go to our third segment. So, listeners, for our third segment is called Giving Me Life, in which each of us is going to discuss something which has been lately inspiring us or giving us joy. So, Jamila, what is giving you life?
In preparation and in appreciation of Better the Devil Who Serves You, I've been trying to watch more slice of life anime. I always watch like intense, cathartic, big anime. So I've been watching Shura Dua Children. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that well. Kaguya-sama Love is War. But Smile Down the Runway, I just discovered it yesterday, and it's really, really cute. It's really sweet. It's about these two high school kids that want to have their dream of being a hypermodel, not just a supermodel, a hypermodel and a fashion designer. And I really like it because I'm so especially in love with the boy who wants to be a fashion designer, because I was shocked when I found out this anime came out as a manga first in Shonen Jump. So this is like a manga that's like focused on boys, and it's about this boy becoming a fashion designer. You know, I'm getting choked up thinking about it. You know, I just really like it. And he's such a gentle, sweet, nurturing, interesting character. And yeah, so it's really giving me life. I love it so much. Netflix is giving me a lot of anime here in the Philippines, so I'm happy about that.
Awesome. Darold, what is giving you life?
Well, the thing that is currently giving me life is I have been doing a whole bunch of reading lately, and every single book that I have read in the past month has been a male-male romance novel. So I've read 4 books this month. I read Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I read Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert. The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, and number 8 in the Wyborn and Griffin series, Maelstrom by Jordan Hawk. The reason that this is giving me so much life is because I only recently discovered like the massive proliferation of male-male romance novels. It honestly floors me because like I kind of harping back to what I talked about, like growing up, I didn't have stories like that. I didn't have a lot of like cute romance novels about guys liking guys and things like that. So the fact that I can literally just get on Goodreads and like find a list of like 40 things that came out in the last month that are about people like me just gives me so much life.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Super
That is
cool.
awesome. So lastly, I'll say is, weirdly, I've mentioned before my love for the super dumb Yakuza series. And I went back and I started, because I'd done the first couple of chapters, Judgment, which is a spinoff.
Detective.
And he's a private detective.
Oh, so
and
cool.
It's as dumb as the Yakuza games, except that like there's a mystery that I don't know where it's going.
Oh.
And I'm actually kind of interested. It's pretty well written. And it's hooking me along like other games haven't. And it's been a nice counteraction to doing a lot of Animal Crossing. Has been this, because I have to get on and Sherry has to trade stuff with me, and that's how that works. So.
Be careful, Tom Nook will charge you rent for trying to play other games.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Listeners, that's our show. This podcast is a production of The Gauntlet. If you'd like to support us, we have a Patreon. You can find that at Patreon.com/Gauntlet. That supports this podcast as well as the other podcasts in our network. If you need to contact us, you can contact us at Twitter at GauntletRPG. If you want to find out more about the Gauntlet and our online gaming community, our now quarterly free open gaming events, you can check that out at gauntlet-rpg.com. And of course, in this time of multiple podcasts, rating and commenting on the podcast is a really good way to help us out as well. Jamie, thank you again for co-hosting.
Yeah.
It's much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
And Darold, I am so happy that you were able to come on to this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh my God, this was so much fun.